The ocean doesn't always stop at the shore. Sometimes it follows you inland, climbing rivers, filling valleys, hunting you down in places you thought were safe. On October 15th, 1954, Hurricane Hazel proved that no distance from the coast could protect you from a storm that refused to die. She killed between 592 and 192 people. The exact number will never be known because entire families vanished, swept away in the dark, their bodies never found. She tore through the Caribbean, demolished the coast of North Carolina, and then did something hurricanes aren't supposed to do. She kept going. She traveled hundreds of miles inland, maintaining her fury, crossing state lines like they meant nothing, until she reached Toronto, Canada, a city 350 miles from the ocean, and drowned it. Meteorologists watched in disbelief as Hazel broke every rule they thought they understood about hurricanes. Residents went to bed thinking they were safe from a coastal storm, only to wake to walls of water crashing through their windows. Entire neighborhoods were erased in minutes. Bridges that had stood for decades collapsed like toys. And in the darkness, people screamed for help that would never come, clinging to trees, to rooftops, to anything that might keep them above the rising water. This is the story of the storm that refused to die, the hurricane that traveled from sea to city and left a trail of bodies across two countries. Stay with us, because this is Hurricane Hazel, the storm that taught North America that nowhere is truly safe. October 5th, 1954. The Caribbean Sea. The water is warm, the air heavy with moisture. In the tropical Atlantic east of the Lesser Antilles, a low-pressure system begins to organize. Meteorologists at the U.S. Weather Bureau notice it on their charts. Just a tropical disturbance at first, nothing unusual for October. But within hours, it strengthens. By October 6th, it's a tropical storm. They give it a name, Hazel, the eighth named storm of the 1954 Atlantic hurricane season. At first, Hazel behaves normally. She drifts westward, gaining strength as she feeds on the warm Caribbean waters. By October 9th, she's a hurricane. By October 10th, she's a Category 3 with sustained winds of 115 miles per hour. And she's heading straight for Haiti, October 12th, 1954. Haiti, the island nation, sits in Hazel's path. Vulnerable and unprepared, Haiti is one of the poorest countries in the Western Hemisphere, with inadequate infrastructure, deforested hillsides prone to mudslides, and thousands of people living in fragile homes made of wood and tin. When Hazel makes landfall near Jérémie on the southern peninsula, she brings winds of 125 miles per hour and torrential rain. The mountains funnel the rain into deadly floods. Rivers overflow within hours, turning into violent torrents that tear through villages. Mudslides bury entire communities. Homes are swept away. People cling to trees, to roofs, to each other. But the water is too strong. The death toll in Haiti is catastrophic. Estimates range from 400 to 1,000 dead. But the true number is impossible to determine. Entire villages are wiped off the map. Bodies are buried under mud or swept out to sea. Families disappear without a trace. After ravaging Haiti, Hazel continues northward, crossing the Windward Passage and slamming into eastern Cuba. The storm weakens slightly over land, but quickly regains strength over the warm waters of the Bahamas. By October 14th, meteorologists at the U.S. Weather Bureau are tracking Hazel with growing concern. She's intensifying again, now a Category 4 hurricane with sustained winds of 140 miles per hour. And she's heading for the U.S. mainland, October 14th, 1954. North Carolina coast, evening. Warnings have been issued all along the eastern seaboard. Residents are urged to evacuate low-lying areas, to board up windows, to seek higher ground. But many people don't take the warnings seriously. Hurricanes usually weaken when they approach land. They expect Hazel to do the same. They're wrong. Hazel makes landfall near the border between North and South Carolina around 9 a.m. on October 15th. But she doesn't weaken. Instead, she accelerates. Most hurricanes slow down as they approach land, giving people time to prepare. Hazel speeds up, moving forward at 30 miles per hour, unusually fast for a hurricane. And she's still intensely powerful, with sustained winds of 130 miles per hour and gusts reaching 150. The combination of high winds and fast forward motion creates a storm surge, unlike anything the region has seen in living memory. The ocean rises 18 feet above normal in some areas. Waves crash over barrier islands, sweeping away homes, cars, boats, entire communities. The beach town of Holden Beach is obliterated. Every single building on the island is destroyed, all 357 structures gone. Ocean Isle Beach, Long Beach, Cherry Grove. Entire resort communities are wiped off the map. Piers that have stood for decades are torn apart by the waves, the ocean view. Fishing pier in North Myrtle Beach collapses into the sea. The Apache Pier in Myrtle Beach is destroyed. Houses that were built just yards from the beach are pulled into the ocean, their foundations undermined by the surge, their walls collapsing under the assault of wind and water. 19 people die in North Carolina, most of them in the coastal counties. Some drown in their homes when the storm surge floods the barrier islands. Others are killed by flying debris. Sheets of metal, roofing torn from buildings and hurled through the air like guillotine blades. One family in Carolina Beach takes shelter in their home, thinking the structure will protect them. The storm surge hits with the force of a freight train, smashing through the walls. The house collapses around them. The parents and 2 children are swept away. Only one daughter survives, clinging to a piece of floating debris for hours until rescuers find her the next morning. But Hazel doesn't stop at the coast. Most hurricanes weaken rapidly once they make landfall. Their energy source, warm ocean water, cut off. But Hazel is different. She maintains her intensity as she moves inland, tearing through North Carolina into Virginia, through Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New York. The winds remain hurricane force for hundreds of miles inland. Trees snap like matchsticks. Power lines fall, leaving millions without electricity. Roofs are torn from buildings. Chimneys collapse. In Raleigh, North Carolina, 100 miles from the coast, the wind is still blowing at 90 miles per hour. In Washington, D.C., gusts reach 98 miles per hour, the highest wind speed ever recorded in the capital. The Washington Monument sways. Trees on the National Mall are uprooted. The storm tears through the city during the evening rush hour, catching commuters off guard. Cars are crushed by falling trees. Buses are blown off course. The streets flood, trapping people in their vehicles. In Virginia, a woman named Ruth Wacker is driving home from work when a tree falls across her car, crushing her instantly. In Richmond, a man is electrocuted when he steps into a puddle concealing a downed power line. The deaths are sudden, random, senseless. But the worst is yet to come. As Hazel moves north, she merges with a cold front moving east from the Great Lakes. This shouldn't happen. Hurricanes usually weaken when they encounter cold air. But instead, the interaction energizes Hazel, transforming her into what meteorologists call an extratropical cyclone, a hybrid storm with the forward speed and coverage of a mid-latitude system, but the intensity of a hurricane. And she's heading straight for Toronto. October 15th, 1954, Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Evening. Toronto is 350 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. The city sits on the northern shore of Lake Ontario, surrounded by rivers and creeks that drain the surrounding countryside. Torontonians have never experienced a hurricane. They've heard about Hazel in the news, a terrible storm that hit the Carolinas, but they assume it will weaken long before it reaches Canada. The weather forecast calls for heavy rain and strong winds, but nothing catastrophic, nothing to panic about. But the meteorologists don't know what's coming. The remnants of Hazel are about to collide with the cold front over southern Ontario, creating a meteorological nightmare. By the time people realize what's happening, it will be too late. The rain begins in the late afternoon. At first, it's just a steady downpour, heavier than usual but not alarming. People go about their evening routines. They cook dinner, watch television, put their children to bed. But the rain doesn't stop. It intensifies. By 8 p.m., it's raining harder than anyone can remember. The sound of rain on roofs becomes a deafening roar. Water gushes from gutters, overwhelms storm drains, floods streets, and it keeps raining. In the next 24 hours, Toronto will receive more than 200 millimeters of rain, 8 inches. That's more than the city normally gets in the entire month of October. And all of it falls in less than a day, much of it in just 6 hours. The rivers can't handle it. The Humber River, which normally meanders peacefully through Toronto's western suburbs, transforms into a raging torrent. The water level rises 10 feet, then 15, then 20 feet above normal. The river bursts its banks and floods the surrounding neighborhoods. Raymore Drive is a quiet residential street in the Weston neighborhood, lined with modest bungalows occupied by working-class families. The street runs parallel to the Humber River, separated from it by a narrow strip of parkland. Residents on Raymore Drive have no reason to fear the river. It's always been there, a gentle presence, a place where children fish and play. But tonight, the river becomes a monster. Around 11 p.m., residents hear a roaring sound, like a freight train approaching. Some step outside to investigate. What they see defies comprehension. A wall of water, 15 feet high, is racing down the river valley. It's not just water. It's a churning mass of debris. Trees, cars, pieces of houses, propane tanks, telephone poles, all being swept along by the current. The water slams into Raymore Drive with the force of an avalanche. Houses are lifted off their foundations and carried away like boats. Walls collapse. Roofs cave in. Families are swept into the current, screaming, clinging to each other, to furniture, to anything. Some are torn from their homes and pulled into the icy, debris-filled water. Others are trapped inside collapsing structures, crushed by debris or drowned as water fills their homes. 32 people on Raymore Drive die that night. Entire families are wiped out. The Palmatier family, mother, father, and 3 children, all drown when their house is swept into the river. The Sharp family, 5 people, gone. The Mercer family, husband, wife, and infant daughter, vanished. In the morning, when the water finally recedes, there's nothing left. The houses are gone. The street is covered in mud, littered with debris. Rescue workers find bodies caught in trees, wedged under bridges, buried in silt. Some bodies are never found, but Raymore Drive isn't the only neighborhood devastated by the flood. The Holland Marsh, a rich agricultural area north of Toronto, is completely inundated. The marsh is a reclaimed wetland, drained and diked in the 1920s to create fertile farmland. Dutch and Chinese immigrant families have built lives here, growing vegetables that supply much of Toronto's produce. But the dikes can't withstand Hazel's floodwaters. They collapse, and the marsh becomes a lake. Farmers watch helplessly as their fields disappear underwater. Crops are destroyed. Greenhouses are swept away. Livestock drown. Some farmers try to save their animals, wading into the floodwaters to cut fences and free cows and pigs. Some succeed. Others are swept away and drown. In Toronto itself, entire neighborhoods are underwater. Basement apartments flood in minutes, trapping residents. Some people drown in their sleep. Others wake to find water rising around their beds and barely escape. A woman named Mary Anderson is asleep in her basement apartment when the water crashes through the windows. She wakes to find herself floating on her mattress, the water already chest deep. She swims to the stairs and climbs out just before the ceiling collapses. In another part of the city, a man named Jim Crawford hears screaming from his neighbor's house. He wades through waist-deep water and breaks down the door. Inside, he finds an elderly couple trapped on the second floor, the staircase already submerged. He helps them climb out through a window and carries them to safety on his back. He makes 3 trips, rescuing 6 people before the house collapses. Emergency services are overwhelmed. Fire trucks can't reach flooded neighborhoods because the streets are impassable. Police officers wade through the water, trying to evacuate people, but the current is too strong. Some officers are swept away and have to be rescued themselves. Telephone lines are down, so there's no way to call for help. People are on their own. At Woodbridge, a suburb northwest of Toronto, a bridge over the Humber River collapses just as a car is crossing. The car plunges into the river. The driver, a volunteer firefighter named Frank Mercer, and his family are swept away. All 5 of them drown. In Etobicoke, 5 Toronto firefighters, Deputy Chief Frank Mercer, Captain Lyle Hooper, and firefighters Roy Oliver, Angus Small, and Dave Palmatier, attempt a rescue mission on Raymore Drive. They're trying to reach a house where people are trapped. They drive their fire truck onto a temporary bridge across a flooded section of road. The bridge collapses. The truck is swept into the river. All 5 men drown. Their bodies are found days later, still in their uniforms, tangled in debris downstream. By midnight, the full scale of the disaster is becoming clear. This isn't just a bad storm, it's a catastrophe. The city's emergency operations center is in chaos. Reports are flooding in from across the metropolitan area, people trapped, houses collapsing, bridges washing away. But there's no way to respond. The roads are impassable. Communication is spotty. Rescuers don't even know where to begin. Dawn on October 16th reveals the devastation. The Humber River Valley looks like a war zone. Where there were once houses, there are now empty lots covered in mud and debris. Trees are stripped of their bark, their branches broken. Cars are piled on top of each other, crushed and mangled. Bridges that stood for decades are gone, reduced to twisted metal and broken concrete. The death toll in Toronto is staggering. 81 people are dead. Thousands are homeless. The city's infrastructure is in ruins. Roads are washed out. Water mains are broken. The power grid is down across much of the metropolitan area. And the psychological toll is immense. People who survived the flood are traumatized, haunted by the memories of that terrible night. They hear the roar of the water in their dreams. They wake up in a panic, thinking they're drowning. Children who watch their homes being swept away develop a lifelong fear of storms. But Toronto isn't the only Canadian city affected. In southern Ontario, the death toll reaches 81. With entire communities damaged or destroyed. The total economic damage in Canada is estimated at $135 million, equivalent to more than $1 billion today. Across the United States, the death toll is even higher. In North Carolina alone, 19 people die, most of them in the coastal storm surge. In Virginia, 13 dead. In Pennsylvania, 13. In New York, 6. In Maryland, 4. In Washington, D.C., 1. The inland flooding causes most of the deaths. Rivers overflow, washing out roads and bridges, trapping people in their cars. Some drown trying to cross flooded roads. Their vehicles swept away by currents they couldn't see. Others are killed by falling trees, by collapsing buildings, by electrocution from downed power lines. In total, Hurricane Hazel kills at least 592 people in the United States and Canada, though some estimates put the number as high as 1,292. The discrepancy exists because many victims were never found. Entire families vanished, swept away by floodwaters, their bodies lost in rivers or buried in mud. Official death certificates were never issued because there were no bodies to confirm. The economic damage is staggering. In the United States, the estimated cost is $281 million, equivalent to more than $2.5 billion today. In Canada, another $135 million. Thousands of homes are destroyed. Tens of thousands are damaged. Businesses are ruined. Crops are lost. Infrastructure will take years to rebuild. But the human cost is incalculable. The trauma, the grief, the shattered lives. In the days after the storm, rescue workers comb through the debris, searching for survivors and recovering bodies. The work is grim and exhausting. They find bodies in rivers, in collapsed houses, in trees. Some bodies are so badly damaged that identification is impossible. They're buried as unknown victims, their families left to wonder. Survivors struggle to comprehend what happened. How could a hurricane from the Caribbean reach Toronto? How could a city 350 miles from the ocean experience storm, surge-level flooding? Meteorologists are asking the same questions. Hazel has rewritten the rules. She's shown that hurricanes can maintain their intensity far inland, especially when they interact with other weather systems. She's proven that no distance from the coast guarantees safety. In the aftermath, governments scramble to respond. In Toronto, emergency shelters are set up in schools and community centers. The Red Cross distributes food, clothing, and blankets. Volunteers work around the clock to help those who lost everything. The Canadian military is deployed to assist with rescue and recovery operations. Soldiers help clear debris, repair roads, and restore essential services. In the United States, President Eisenhower declares affected areas federal disaster zones, releasing emergency funds for recovery. The Army Corps of Engineers is dispatched to repair damaged infrastructure, but the recovery will take years, and for many, life will never be the same. Families who lost loved ones carry the grief forever. Children who survived grow up with trauma. Communities that were destroyed never fully recover. Some neighborhoods are simply abandoned, deemed too dangerous to rebuild. Raymore Drive in Toronto is one of them. The street where 32 people died is never rebuilt. The city expropriates the land and turns it into a park. Today it's called Raymore Park, a memorial to those who died. There's a plaque commemorating the victims, but otherwise no sign remains of the houses that once stood there. The river flows peacefully through the valley, giving no indication of the monster it became that terrible night. Hurricane Hazel leads to major changes in how North America prepares for and responds to hurricanes. In the United States, the Weather Bureau improves its forecasting and warning systems. New radar technology is deployed to track storms more accurately. Hurricane Hunter aircraft begin flying more reconnaissance missions, gathering data from inside the storms. In Canada, the government establishes the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, tasked with managing watersheds and preventing future flooding. They implement strict regulations on development in flood-prone areas. They build new dams and reservoirs to control river levels during storms. They widen rivers and improve drainage systems. The changes work. When major storms hit Toronto in later years, the flooding is far less severe. The lessons learned from Hazel saved countless lives in the decades that follow. But those lessons came at a terrible price. Hurricane Hazel also changes the way hurricanes are named. Before Hazel, names were reused year after year, but Hazel's devastation is so profound that the World Meteorological Organization decides her name should never be used again. It's retired, like a jersey number of a legendary athlete. There will never be another Hurricane Hazel. The name becomes synonymous with the worst kind of disaster. Unexpected, overwhelming, and deadly. Survivors carry the memory of Hazel for the rest of their lives. In 2004, on the 50th anniversary of the storm, the Toronto Star publishes a series of interviews with people who lived through it. Their stories are harrowing. A woman named Betty Kennedy describes watching her neighbor's house being swept away with the family still inside. She heard them screaming as the house broke apart. She was powerless to help. A man named Jack Marks remembers wading through chest-deep water to rescue his elderly parents from their flooded home. He carried his mother on his back, his father clinging to his shoulder. They made it to safety, but 3 of their neighbors drowned. A woman named Dorothy Wright recalls the moment she realized the flood was coming. She was in her living room with her husband and children when they heard the roar. She looked out the window and saw a wall of water rushing toward them. They ran upstairs, grabbing the children. Seconds later, the first floor was underwater. They spent the night huddled on the second floor, listening to the house creak and groan, praying it wouldn't collapse. In the morning, when the water receded, they climbed down to find their home destroyed. Everything on the first floor was gone: furniture, photographs, keepsakes. All they had left were the clothes on their backs. Many survivors speak of the guilt of surviving when so many others didn't, the guilt of not being able to help, of hearing screams and being powerless to respond. Some say the guilt never goes away. It becomes a permanent weight, a shadow that follows them through life. But there are also stories of heroism, of neighbors helping neighbors, of strangers risking their lives to save people they'd never met. Jack Crawford, the man who rescued 6 people from a collapsing house, is hailed as a hero. He's awarded a medal for bravery, but he says he just did what anyone would do. He couldn't stand by and let people die. Frank Mercer, the firefighter who died with his family, is remembered as a hero too. He was on his way to help with evacuations when the bridge collapsed. He died doing what he dedicated his life to, saving others. In Toronto, a street is named after him. In Etobicoke, a memorial is erected honoring the 5 firefighters who died that night. Their names are inscribed on a bronze plaque. Deputy Chief Frank Mercer, Captain Lyle Hooper, Roy Oliver, Angus Small, Dave Palmatier. Every year on October 15th, the fire department holds a ceremony at the memorial, honoring their sacrifice. The legacy of Hurricane Hazel extends far beyond the immediate damage. She changes the way we think about hurricanes, about weather, about disaster preparedness. Before Hazel, hurricanes were seen as coastal problems. Inland areas didn't worry much about them. After Hazel, everyone understands that hurricanes can reach far from the ocean, especially when they interact with other weather systems. Hazel teaches meteorologists to pay more attention to the speed and trajectory of storms, not just their intensity. A fast-moving hurricane can be just as dangerous as a slow-moving one, sometimes more so because it gives people less time to prepare. She teaches urban planners to be more careful about where they allow development. Floodplains are floodplains for a reason. Building in them is asking for disaster. She teaches emergency managers to have better plans in place, to communicate more effectively, to coordinate rescue efforts across jurisdictions. And she teaches all of us that nature is more powerful than we can imagine, that storms don't respect borders or distances or our assumptions about what's possible, that the ocean can reach you even when you think you're safe. That complacency kills. The death toll from Hurricane Hazel, somewhere between 592 and 1,092 people, makes her one of the deadliest hurricanes in North American history. Only a handful of storms have killed more. The Great Galveston Hurricane of 1900 killed at least 8,000. The 1928 Okeechobee hurricane killed at least 2,500. But in the modern era, with advanced forecasting and warning systems, death tolls that high are rare. Hazel's toll is a reminder of how deadly these storms can be, even with modern technology. But Hazel also reminds us of something else: resilience. The capacity of people to survive, to rebuild, to carry on after unimaginable loss. Toronto didn't disappear after Hazel. It rebuilt. Stronger, safer, more prepared. The same is true for all the communities Hazel devastated. They mourned their dead. They buried their lost. And then they got to work. By 1955, just a year after the storm, most of the damaged infrastructure had been repaired. New houses were being built. Businesses were reopening. Life was slowly returning to normal. But it was a different normal. People who lived through Hazel never forgot it. They checked weather forecasts obsessively. They kept emergency supplies on hand. They knew evacuation routes by heart. They taught their children to respect the weather, to never take it for granted. And they told the story of Hazel again and again, to their children, their grandchildren, anyone who would listen. Because they understood something important. The story needs to be told. The memory needs to be kept alive. Not to terrorize people or to dwell on tragedy, but to teach, to remind, to prepare, because another Hazel will come. Maybe not in our lifetimes, maybe not for 100 years, but she will come. The ocean is patient, the wind is relentless, and nature always has the last word. If this story moved you, if it made you think about the power of nature and the fragility of human life, then stay with us. Subscribe and keep the memory alive. Because stories like this matter. They remind us that we're not as safe as we think, that disasters can strike anywhere, anytime, that preparation saves lives, that communities matter, that resilience is real. Hurricane Hazel killed between 592 and 1,192 people. She destroyed thousands of homes. She caused billions of dollars in damage. She reached from the Caribbean to Canada, from the ocean to the heartland. She broke every rule meteorologists thought they understood about hurricanes. And she left a legacy that lasts to this day. The storm that slammed from sea to city. The hurricane that refused to die. The disaster that taught North America that nowhere is truly safe. The wind may have stopped. The rain may have ended. But the echo of Hurricane Hazel still resonates, 70 years later, in the memorials, in the stories, in the building codes and flood maps and emergency plans, in the collective memory of everyone who lived through it or lost someone to it. The ocean came to Toronto that night, and it left a mark that will never fade. Retry Claude can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.